How's everybody doing this morning? Got coffee, tea? Good? We're awake? All right. Awesome. So my name is Paul. I'm with a company called Neotys. We do performance testing. We're performance nerds.
And my name is Henrik. So I work as a partner solution evangelist. So I'm looking at the new stuff in the performance world. And I'm really delighted to share this lightning talk with Paul today. So I hope you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah, this is an example of effective communication and collaboration. It only took, 4 hours over the phone and then like 15 minutes last night to just change this all around. So before we even step in, how many people actually do significant performance testing? Great. All right, so we have a room of people who don't necessarily need to be bought in about why performance is important. But I just want to go over a few things, right? This is a different lens, right? Let's think about it in terms of why performance matters, particularly, obviously, for the user experience, right? There's reasons for this. And take a picture. I'll give you the deck. But the point is, the user experience suffers when we don't pay proper attention to performance. Also, the developer experience is negatively impacted, right? You push faulty code. It's very easy to do that now. Go fast and break things isn't an option. Also, there's a lot of things that happen particularly in complex systems that unless you're actually testing for this and proving that it's actually going to work at scale, it's hard to see when you're doing a commit. And then operations. We work with a lot of people in large organizations from all different backgrounds. And one of the places that are really suffering right now is operations. How to go fast, how to build out scalable systems, how to build fast and reliable services, right? And that's not always easy. Scalability isn't free. So all three lenses, if you think about it, right, this is why performance testing matters. Here's a classic example of why reliability and scalability matters. Do you remember this? Prime Day, right? Everybody has this problem. This isn't a unicorn problem. This isn't a startup problem. This isn't a large enterprise problem. It's an everyone problem. Performance matters to everybody. So Henrik is going to walk through a couple of concepts real quick, but I'd like to use one more lens to say, look, the modern mantra for how to fit these maybe classically called non-functional tests, right? These non-functional characteristics and requirements, how do you actually fit that back into a pipeline when we're trying to go so fast, it's easier to just say no. It's too long, it's too slow, right? That's the old way of thinking about it. The new way of thinking about it is to say, we care about feedback. We care about short feedback loops. And in order to accomplish that, what we need to do is have three things. We need to think early testing, early validation. We need to think often, how often we do these things. And we also need to very carefully pay attention to how easy these things are, right? If any one of these things is not up to snuff, is not on par with what people, particularly in the development space and operations space, care about, then it's going to look like it can't fit in, right? So we need to make performance, and this is what Neotys particularly is into and does for our customers. We help them make this happen. So I won't go through too many things, but right, the early is important, right? API, often, that means automation. That also means matching clock speeds between the dev and the test and the operations teams to be able to actually release on time. And then easy, things have to be flexible because the technologies that we use change all the time.
So I don't know if you've been in performance since many years, but back in the old days, waterfall was mainly how we would deliver the performance testing and product lifecycle. And we were always happening very late on the cycle, just before the deployment. And everything was shifting, so instead of having, let's say, 1 week to test, we have a few days. And when we discover problems, it was too late. I mean, usually performance problems are not easy to resolve. So by testing too late in the cycle, it was a mess. So that's for sure. So now with the change of methodology by moving to Agile and now DevOps, it brings challenges, but more advantage on how we can resolve and avoid having potential problems to our users. So how do we do that? Simple. One single word, unit performance testing, or it could be named API testing, component testing. There are many, many different names for that. The idea is we know that if we test late in the cycle, it means we are having a sample application. So we want to avoid that. So we know that we have APIs, we have components in our architecture, so why don't we test those before? At least we are securing those components in advance. So there are a couple of advantages. You can test any part of the systems. The test cases are super simple. One maybe API call, a couple of data sets, low maintenance. And that allows you to automate. That's the key. And the last piece is third-party components. We're never testing them because it's another vendor that provides it, and here you can do that. So the use cases, the workflow is very easy. You got a business case. Let's say I want to buy a product through a website. So this is the specification. I know that I'm going to need to test that. I need to translate that into component calls, API calls. So here in my example, I got the red component, I got the gray component, and the green component. And then I plan my sprints. So I know pretty sure when those components will be available during my project lifecycle. So once the red component is available, I make my small tests about it. I include it in the pipeline, which means every time I build, there will be tests running on it. And I will be able to compare and trend every test on and on during every build. If the next component is available, then I do the same. So it means I have 2 tests running in my pipeline, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, do I limit my test only on API? No. Why? Because if you take the example of a car, it will mean that the car manufacturer will test the brakes separately, takes the tires separately, tests the engine separately. Would you buy a car where the manufacturer had never tested the assembled car? I don't think so. It will be too dangerous. So the same thing for us. Once we get the assembled app, we need to retest because we are thinking about our users, the user experience. So that's the idea.
So let's talk about how this actually happens early, right? Early typically means code, okay? We're moving to a world where everything has to be expressed in a way that can be reusable. So there's 2 parts to this, right? You have to construct tests, and then you have to execute them. So minus a lot of information that if you visit us at booth 404, I wanted to get 503, but we got booth 404. We can go through a lot more detail on this, but the point is you can express your tests just like a functional test, like Selenium, like Karate DSL to do API testing. You can express your performance tests in various ways in code. That allows the developers to actually be able to create app code and test code in the same cycle. Conversely, with release engineering and pipeline management, you can actually express how to execute your tests. In pipeline, the Neoload run allows us to take this thing on the left and be able to run that in a pipeline and do that on a regular basis. And we're doing demos nonstop in that booth on this stuff later on today. And then also, I just want to give a head nod to the fact that a lot of our stuff is API enabled, meaning that if you really want to go on your own way, you have the power to do that. So when we think about how often, right, how often this happens, when you start to automate this stuff, it produces data. We've got the ability to actually visualize performance and trends over time, to deep dive on these performance tests, right, through a web dashboard that produces resource URLs you can actually use in Slack and whatever, and then export this data. The APIs are enabled on this, so you can go and build this into whatever integrations you need to get the data out again. You can express this in pipeline. You might have a lot of different development teams actually doing this in parallel. So we support these various different use cases for performance in the pipeline. Think about it, though. If we're just doing API testing, we're not getting that complete experience. We're not actually integrating to the live systems. So what we try to do is provide you the most visibility, right, you can get without providing superfluous information or toil, right? So one of the things we do is obviously load testing metrics, really important to know what was perceived by a load engine. Also, when you put pressure on a system, what was the impact of that pressure, right? That's the server side. What happened on the server side? But that's not good enough, right? We get customers that need to know, yes, but what impact is this going to have on the end user experience? And so we work with a number of functional tools, particularly with Selenium, where we can actually run a few Selenium scripts on the side in a small grid. At the same time, we're putting highly scalable, very cost-effective load testing on the system, so you can actually get end-to-end metrics along the way. For time's sake, I'll go past this, but that's how our Selenium works, and we can dive into that in the booth.
In terms of injecting load, we are very aligned with any load testing architecture, which means there is a controller where you have your tests and the test definitions, and then when you have to inject the load on your app, you need load emitters. And we can either run the load on-prem or through the cloud. And we are very flexible as well. So we are compatible with Docker. We are compatible with OpenShift. All the different, if you have your own recipe on how you want to deploy our component, we are compatible with it. No worries about it. So either you can use our cloud, where we provide 58 different locations. So if you want to test a specific user based in Japan or Australia, you can do that. And if you have your own cloud provider, of course, you can take our image and deploy that on your own cloud provider.
Our point is not to be restrictive, right? There's a lot of solutions out there that want to restrict you from doing the thing you need to do. And our mission is to make sure that you're getting that feedback as fast as possible. So you can meet us in the booth. Again, it's both of us. We have facial hair. Come find us. And we'll look forward to questions there. Thank you.